Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. So, first things first, a little bit of an agenda of what you can expect today. We are going to be talking first about engagement in mandatory training as kind of a whole. What is this kind of realm of training experiencing on a global scale, maybe some macro trends? From there, we're going to give you a deeper spotlight into how to transform the mandatory training status quo using Kahoot 360. And then we're going to contextualize that by giving you some insights into a customer story of a real world Kahoot client that it will use everything that I will walk you through and has used everything that I will walk you through in terms of strategy to deploy and deliver compliance training to a workforce of over 4,000 employees, and then finally wrap up with some Q&A to send you off with some great insights and takeaways. So that being said, it wouldn't be Kahoot if we didn't start right out of the gate energizing with a question type. And so this is going to be a drop pin question. For those of you near and dear to Kahoot, you might know how this works already. For those of you that are new today, you will see in a second on your devices or wherever you've joined the Kahoot session an option to drop a pin on a map. So please do drag the image, drop the pin on the map to represent where you're coming from. And while everybody is doing that, we'll get a very nice interactive picture of the folks in this virtual room here today. Now, while everybody's doing that, I'll take a second to look at the chat. Shout out to Georgia, Rhode Island. I hope I pronounced this correctly, but Roquevert, France. So somebody joining us all the way from France, Myrtle Beach. We have a good array in different areas of the world here. I see Tanya raising her hand. Tanya, by all means, feel free to drop some questions in the Q&A either in the session on the Kahoot or inside of Zoom, wherever is easier for you. Alrighty. So as you will see in real time here, we've gone ahead and see now this dynamic map. This is a fingerprint of you all. This is a dynamic, one of a kind map made up of the people in this room now. It seems like we have a good amount of you in the North America region, which, is no surprise, but we have a couple of you all joining us from the European side over here. We have a couple people in the Africa side of the world over here. So super, super cool to see. And thank you all for joining. I know it might be later on in your day for those folks that are on the other side of the world from us here in North America. So welcome and thank you. Okay. So moving right along into another question, asking you, what is your current role at work? So now you'll have the opportunity to answer multiple choice. Now, you might notice for those of you that are maybe a little bit more seasoned with Kahoot does have, gamification elements to it. That is a big piece to how we drive engagement. But in an effort to accommodate, both ends of the spectrums and need, in this case, this particular experience, our presentation mode, which is newly minted. I say newly minted, but it's been out for just quite a little bit of tad of time. This definitely for this year is more geared around the presentation format, but still allowing you to interject these kind of meaningful check-ins without necessarily having to sit by a scoreboard or have to be like super constrained around the timer and the kind of quick pace of what a gamified classic mode Kahoot would look like. So that's maybe why you're seeing some differences here. But no surprise to me, the majority of you all joining today are L&D folks, and we do have a couple of other people here represented from the HR space, the marketing space, operations, and a couple of you with other. I am interested to hear what the other is, so if you could drop it in the Zoom chat. But with that being said, moving right along. We are now going to start diving into our section here around engagement in mandatory training and taking a look at the conversation of engagement in the workforce in a more broader scale. So one thing that I wanted to kind of start the conversation with is talking about how workforce engagement is at an all-time low and how that correlates specifically into the real world impact of that low engagement costing companies money, right? When we see lower engagement, we see a less engaged a workforce that maybe increases in absenteeism, lowers productivity. There is a shift in the company culture, maybe not as proactive of a nature in the workforce. It feeds into so many systems when you have a disengaged workforce. And based around that, in our kind of report that we used to inform some of this research for us, we looked at the Gallup report, where we identified, that only 21% of employees are truly engaged with, which is a big dip. And this is across global employee engagement, by the way, and it has fallen 2 points in this last year, which equates to a productivity loss and the costs the global economy around $438 billion. So quite a hefty sum of money, all coming from just a disengaged workforce. And this to us at Kahoot means that having 100% completion rate on your compliance modules is important, but the vast majority of your workforce may not be able to recall, or most importantly, apply that critical knowledge on the job, which is also crucial like the formula of what you would need to like quantify a successful compliance training completion. For any training, to truly be effective, you need to capture the attention of your employees and then help that material and content stick to them long after that session is over. So when teams are actively engaged, they're not just binarily, checking the box, having it in one ear, out the other. They're starting to build knowledge around it, becoming subject matter experts, building confidence to make the right decisions on the job without having to rely on a supplemental aid, or constantly having to, bubble up questions to their manager, supervisor, leadership. Which, that's fine if it happens, but at least in this way, you're enabling the employee with the tools that they need to make autonomous decisions that you can trust are also within the lines and the confines of this compliance training need. And then finally, this kind of application of really focusing on powering up the engagement factor helps you shift from this mindset of passive completion, which I think is very much embedded into how we communicate in general in the corporate space, and then take it to an active participation state where you are building stronger, more reliable culture of compliance within your organization. Excuse me. So that's a little bit into what we're seeing based around this conversation of mandatory training and compliance training. And with that being said, we wanted to showcase for you here a little bit of our own information data point based on the Superstar Presenter Spotlight report that Kahoot commissions to just kind of gauge overall sentiment across the world in kind of yeah, presenters and facilitators and everybody maybe in that space, both L&D or maybe any of the other business functions. But we found in this study that the folks leading these sessions feel this disconnect of disengagement very prominently. This study found that 53 of presenters say that the number one pain point that they have is a disengaged workforce and or a disengaged audience, right? And I'm sure we've all been there, especially any of us that have consistent, touch points with either colleagues or direct reports, employees, or maybe even leadership, right? It is really tough to maintain energy, or even as a presenter facilitator, know if your material is landing. I mean, I'm sure many of us can take a halt and say, okay, maybe it's something that I'm doing, but a lot of the times we don't even have feedback to know, am I doing well or am I doing poor? Maybe there's a survey after the fact that might inform us for next time, but it does slow down the process of adapting in real time. And so with this finding, and also kind of hitting back into the Gallup report, in that report of Gallup, we also find that 27% of managers globally are engaged at work, but that is a very small margin and has also fallen as well in 2024. And the big finding to this is that with managers that are disengaged, it easily equates to disengaged teams as well. So this hits back into the area of culture, right? We need to do a better job of enabling this critical workforce and in line in the hierarchy, such as managers, facilitators, people directly deploying connection points to the workforce to help them shift the culture from within. 70% of team engagement is attributable to a manager or the manager like figure. And so I think it's really time to talk about, okay, how do we truly start to think about our experience in deploying this training? How do we start to address the fact that people are not paying attention? And how do we give them the tools to enable them to do this in real time, right? A lot of esoteric questions in the ether, but we definitely feel that with our tool as far as Kahoot, we provide you a kind of lifeline in helping you do this in a way that's effective, accessible, and also well received by employees, right? So with that being said, I do want to also share this next slide, just talking about the traditional tool landscape of what we're all using on our day to day, right? Because the big piece of what we're talking about is the status quo, right? The disengaged workforce has been historically and has experienced the experience of being trained by presenters who only really have know and also have maybe just the one way to communicate, which is death by PowerPoint, right? We can't escape it. It will be a fixture, I think, for forever, really, right? There needs to be still an ability to provide supplemental resources to help you train on content, deliver content, be it that you're doing like a live interaction or a fully remote interaction, or maybe even a hybrid kind of interaction. But you will need content slides still. So the way Kahoot has approached this is thinking about, okay, we know that that's something that needs to remain because it is integral, it is useful, it is tried and true, it's proved to work. But how do we take it from that passive space and that passive method and create the ability for you to deliver crucial information, but in a dynamic way? And with compliance specifically, it creates this cycle of trying to deliver crucial information, but when it's delivered, it not truly landing because it's already complex, condensed. There's a lot of it, might be complex, and it does make it hard to recall, even for the most applied minds. I would say we always have really good faith actors and employees that are sitting there eager to learn, but because of the complexity maybe of the subject, it makes it really hard to recall everything all at once. So that gap in compliance between delivery and retention is where the risk lives, right? It's where accidents start to happen, and it has a very real world impact where there's costly compliance failures that start to kind of come to the forefront. And so the question is, how do we break that cycle, right? How do we empower your trainers, your managers with tools that re-engage their teams and turn them from passive listeners into active participants? In the study of andragogy, which is, adult learning essentially, there is this need to be a little bit more hands-on and tactile and dynamic to make it memorable. Adult brains just work completely different than, child brains. And so how do we actually make sure that they're retaining what they learn? And that's kind of the scope at which we've approached this session today. Is let's help enable you with a strategy and a format, as well as the tool to help you break that cycle, to help you make compliance and mandatory training much more dynamic by leveraging some of your existing and tried and true kind of staples here, such as PowerPoint, Google Slides, or even some of your LMS tools as well. So That being said, a little quick slider question just to see if we were paying attention. And the magic of Kahoot right at work. We just talked a lot about a lot of different things, but here's a little tidbit that I want to refresh on. So, according to Gallup, what percent of employees are actually engaged? So, now on your devices, you'll be able to use the slider and select the answer if you were paying attention. Remember, active participation equates to active listening. And while everybody's answering, a little bit of the science of Kahoot and the magic of Kahoot is that when you're gamifying the experience and you're attributing, this instant recognition to things, you're accruing points. If there's a scoreboard, there's even an additional layer of recognition. People want to see their name displayed on the Zoom, right? They want to know that they're doing well. They receive that immediate gratification and kind of, dopamine hit of, oh, I got it right. I got points for it. And that in it of itself is a little bit of the science behind why Kahoot is also really great at turning that passivity into active participation. But it seems like 15 of you right on the money. This answer didn't have any margin of error, but you can also program, a margin of error if you want to give additional points to people that get close to the answer. So just a little tidbit on this particular question type's flexibility. But moving right along into an open-ended question, so now you'll have a chance to just fully give some opinions here. What do you think is the most effective way to make mandatory training engaging? I mean, we have a lot of L&D folks in the space. I'd love to hear your insights here. So you'll have some time to type a little blurb of up to 250 characters. I just want to kind of pick your brains. We've talked a little bit about these macro trends around mandatory training, compliance training, and just engagement in the global workforce in general. But I'd love to hear from the experts in the room. In the meantime, it seems like our chat is right and underway. Tyler's answering some lovely questions. I'll let her keep doing that. Some Q&As coming through. I see Chris from South Africa. Welcome, Chris. Persephone, good day. Good day to you as well. Awesome, awesome. And I see a couple of you maybe that answered in the Q&A. If you still haven't joined the Kahoot, and for those of you folks that are newer to Kahoot, remember that you can always join by going to kahoot.it on your mobile browser and or your desktop laptop and inputting the game pin that you're seeing on screen. That will give you the access to the interactive controller where you can actually participate and see yourself, represented in our Kahoot session here. Just a little quick refresher for those of you that are my newbies. But okay, let's go ahead and show answers, which is another neat thing of using Kahoot in a kind of live environment like this. I am enabling and opening up a two-way dialogue now, right? Talking about that aspect of how do we break the cycle of passivity. We have to think of a new way to modernize and digitize the experience. And instead of just having like a one-way direction where I as a facilitator am talking to you as the audience, now you're talking back to me. And now that's shaping how I'm, putting together like what I'm saying. I may be adjusting, highlighting tidbits that are important to just this specific group. So you see in real time how much it agilizes me into being able to adapt as opposed to having to wait for feedback at the end and then adjust for the next time around, right? But a lot of good insights coming here. I'll read through some of these. So activity-based training, active participation and not just reading slides, 100%. Incorporating them into the training is 100% one that I really identify with. I think Kahoot does a really good job of doing this for you in a way that's accessible for you, especially most of us in the training or facilitation or manager space know that there's, one of us to maybe every 10 of them. And so it makes it really hard to dedicate time to try and be able to enact that experience onto everybody where you're asking them for their opinion. And Kahoot does this in a way that's very low stakes because there's like a little bit of an anonymity to it. So people feel comfortable, right? To answer, the kind of pressure's a little bit lessened. And so therefore it makes for more of a safe environment. But I like also humor, pictures, analogies. I love to use GIFs. Sometimes I have to like feel it out because I'm a death by GIF person. So I love to use little animations. I think they just bring a good air of levity to things. And it could be also memorable, right? Sometimes you see a really memorable GIF, and then you and like ask a really important question, and then they will always think of that GIF when they're thinking about that complex topic. So that's kind of a little personal secret of mine on how I like to use that. But Kahoot does also have a partnership with Giphy, and so when you have your Kahoot subscription, you're able to use that media inside of Kahoot. Short quizzes, simple videos, rewards, gamification, a lot of great insights here, guys. Thank you so much for sharing. So now we've had some time to talk about the state of affairs when it comes to global workforce engagement and the macro trends around, a little bit on this topic of compliance and mandatory training and some of the problems posing and blocking this area for you all. So now we're going to take a pivot and talk about, okay, that's the problem. We understand the problem a little bit of what's happening, what's impeding us, what's impacting us. Let's talk about how we solve for that problem. And in comes the aspect of Kahoot here. How can you use a tool like Kahoot to help you solve for those problems we just talked about? So, first off and foremost, just walking it back, I do get the sense here based on just some of the questions that we're receiving and and just the nature of things. We do have some newbie folks with us. So just to give you a quick rundown, Kahoot in and of itself is a platform. It's a platform that allows you to author and deploy an experience like you're seeing today, right? This session that we're doing today, this interactive session, is a Kahoot in and of itself. And it helps in the corporate space to make training or presentations or meetings or events, you name it, surveys, any sort of communication touch point that you might have in the corporate space or learning and development driven touch point that you have in the corporate space can be supported by Kahoot. And that is our main aim, right? Being the ultimate workforce engagement platform. And we do that via many ways, namely in the vein of gamification, interactivity, and dynamic experiences, right? So, with that little preamble set, we want to take a look at just Kahoot and our kind of presence in the corporate space. At this time, 97% of the Fortune 500 companies are using us for a many different array of use cases, but namely for L&D is a big one, right? Learning and development. Kahoot is an education tool, and so that is a pretty prevalent use case that these companies are leveraging us for. And we have a really active network of users and participants that enjoy and love the tool. And we focus and drive down and drill down on four key areas of the corporate life, namely in this space of learning and development, allowing you to deploy memorable experiences using mobile forward or interactive dynamic gamification tools. The communication area, which allows you to motivate and retain the attention in between live sessions, which is really, really crucial to the success of a sticky, memorable training. Audience engagement, once again, powered by that gamification, interactive engine that Kahoot drives itself on. And then finally, brand engagement, allowing you to make memorable touch points with your consumers as a company, right? We're talking right now about an internal kind of use case, but then there's also the application of how do we shift communication and the way we dialogue with our consumers and our patrons and our clients. And so Kahoot aims to service all four of these key core components. From there, we walk the walk, but can we talk the talk, or the other way around? Can we talk the talk? Can we walk the walk? And the answer is yes. When taking a look at, this vast portfolio of Fortune 500 companies that leverage Kahoot, we've seen very real impact into key areas such as NPS scores in their training, increasing it by 65% or lowering attrition by 35%. And then finally, employee satisfaction going through the roof when measured against pre-Kahoot usage. And this is all real world like ROI data based on clients that we actively have. So, with that being said, let's get to the meat and potatoes of things. How do we make your compliance training impactful with Kahoot? And here we have a recipe for you, a strategy for you. It starts even before a live session, our recommendation is start before the training, right? Drive engagement, drive interest, create a touch point prior to your training using one of our modalities called Kahoot Stories, which is a really neat mobile forward experience where you can send out, a little bit of an article, newsletter type of experience that can also have interactivity on it. You can ask poll questions and feedback questions. This will help you collect potential questions to then maybe shape some of the content in a way that is relevant to the audience you're talking to, and really get a kind of a sentiment gauge on where everybody is entering this in and putting them in the right headspace for the actual live training. So then we shift into the during the training portion, which is the live portion of things, whether you're meeting on a fully live environment or a fully remote environment or even a hybrid environment. Kahoot is designed with the ability to be flexible in that in mind. We can be a tool to be used in all three of those scenarios. And how Kahoot does, what it does is allowing you to ensure that your employees are actively participating. So like in this case, you're not employees, but you're my audience, and you're actively participating via the interaction and the gamification. So you can use things like the interactive questions to help you reinforce these complex topics, help make specific data memorable, help collect opinions in real time, and create more of a dialogue as opposed to just like a one-way track of communication. And then finally, the kind of nail in the coffin on things is the after training portion, right? Not only are you able to engage them before, engage them during, but now with Kahoot's reporting capabilities, you're able to receive deep insights into the sentiment of the group, into the performance of the group based on that particular training module, maybe, and then identify some key data points that will help you inform your follow-up strategy, right? The way I've also seen this be very effectively used is that often enough in the L&D space, people will say, well, it's really hard for us to determine like who needs to undergo retraining unless you have some sort of like certification or test after the fact. It's really hard to gauge who was engaged, who was, maybe somebody got all the answers right, but were they really engaged? Are they really going to retain? And so in our reporting, you're able to kind of glean these insights and be able to then deploy very specific follow-up. So maybe if you just want to deploy like a follow-up asynchronous training to the cohort that maybe didn't do as well in that initial live training, you can go ahead and kind of deploy that to them to just give you an idea. But with that being said, right into a brainstorm. This is a question asking you, now we've talked a little bit about the problems at hand, maybe some of those you resonate with, and also a little bit of insight into how we recommend Kahoot can solve for those. How can you see your company using Kahoot in mandatory training if you're not already doing so? Or if you're not an active patron of Kahoot, can you see Kahoot being used in your mandatory and compliance trainings? So while we wait for everybody to answer, here's a little sneak peek into the leaderboard, and I'll go through some of the Q&A stuff here. Alma answering some questions here. Lovely. Chris, this is an interesting one. Chris Gangan asks about using Kahoot and PowerPoint to reduces the flow, and has this been addressed? I completely agree. It's something that I always talk about, that we always try to make the integrations as seamless as possible. And this is good feedback for definitely like our product team, and we will bubble this up. But I've always advised that, in that kind of partnership of PowerPoint and Kahoot, there is a little bit of a break of flow, right? Because we don't have as much control there because of course there is another party involved in that area, and so we have to be respectful of what's available. However, my recommendation is we also have Slide Sync that recently launched, which is a feature that allows you to connect to your OneDrive or your Google Drive and bring your presentations directly into Kahoot. So that way, if anything changes in that base seed template that exists in your OneDrive or in your Google Drive, it immediately feeds back into Kahoot without you having to do two things at once. And then you're able to keep a good flow of things, and then as well as be able to still leverage all the content that you've worked on inside of PowerPoint. But definitely good question. So we have a lot of ideas that came through here. Thank you so much, guys. using it for knowledge checks and quiz reviews, follow through to see how much was retained, integrate our existing PowerPoints in Kahoots, drive engagement, follow up training. Great, great recommendations all across the board here, everyone. Now I'll start some voting. On your devices, you're going to be able to now vote on these peer ideas. So you can either choose to give a star to the idea you want to vote for, or move right along and skip the idea if you don't want to vote for it. So I'll give everybody some time to vote there. And then I do understand we are a little bit over time already. I'm going to aim to wrap this up quickly. If you can stay, please by all means do. But if you do have to drop, I do understand. We thank you for your time. We will be sending a follow-up link to the recording for our registrants and our participants today. So don't fret, you won't miss out on anything. But I did just want to address that item of time because I know that we're all busy people and I want to make sure I'm staying as close to our timeline as possible. Okay, I'm going to stop the voting now, just for the sake of time, and let's see what came about. So everybody received some good, but there were 3 standout ideas that were voted on. Oh, and it was a 3-way tie, it looks like. Would be way better for engagement than regular slides and PowerPoint. Integrate our existing PowerPoints into Kahoots and add interactive questions. And turn SOP training into a story. 100%. My hat's off to you for those of you that know of Kahoot story. That's exactly what we were talking about in the formula of before the training. It's that mobile forward article style, e-reader style modality of Kahoot. Okay, so with that being said, last little tidbit here that I want to leave you with is some contextualized real world examples of the strategy we shared with you earlier and some of the areas and problems that are being solved with Kahoot over at our client SNCF. I always have a hard time saying that, but they deliver compliance training, to remind you a little bit here, to the over 4,000 workforce, and specifically, based around that safety area. They are France's national railway system, and they've used Kahoot to train their employees over a 2-year period. They gamify complex topics and talk about security behaviors and protocols. I mean, when you're working in the railway system, it is imperative to be fully up to speed on compliance training. Our point of contact and client there, Arnaud and his team, have increased engagement and learning outcomes in the mandatory training space. He is the head of culture and safety training, so he's very, very committed, and that is a primary objective of his, of making sure that this is a area that they're tackling methodically and strategically in a way that's impactful and provides them the results that they're looking for. And as you see here in the quote, he talks about how he uses Kahoot as an introduction to Kickstart sessions and to keep everyone energized during, and then also making sure that people are retaining the information, which is really, really awesome, and how it's impacting their key safety procedures by providing that interactivity. Um, Breaking down those complex topics into bite-sized Kahoots is a big piece to how they boost engagement, right? So in his kind of write-up here, he talks about how instead of deploying maybe one large chunk of content, he breaks it down into maybe 20-minute Kahoots that include a mix of content and questions, making it a little bit more accessible for people to remember, letting a little bit more time to exist in between for the audience to digest the information. It includes, multiple choice quiz questions to break down these tricky topics. And he does share with us that the Kahoot use helps motivate the employees and increase their awareness of the safety procedures and concepts. And when you're executing them consistently in this condensed time frame, it once again goes back to helping the retention of their use. right? And this retention of use is the reinforcement of knowledge. At the end of each training, there is a Kahoot where also they collect feedback to improve the future sessions, and then they use reports very much in the vein of the strategy that we shared with you to identify and address the knowledge gaps in a methodic and strategic way that also, is not wasting additional resources and time into training people that maybe don't necessarily need to be quote unquote retrained. So Kahoot, they say, like SNCF has shared with us that Kahoot is one of their flagship training tools, and that he believes Kahoot is irreplaceable because it involves the learners throughout the sessions. Going back to that theme of taking something from a passive learning type of style to an active participation learning style. And he also believes that it helps the employees retain important information more effectively, because the main challenge they were experiencing is making sure that their employees were actually retaining the content. And so with Kahoot, not only being playful and fun, it helps them focus a little bit better on the educational messages because they're able to see themselves represented, have a little bit more of interactivity to ask questions, and really make sure that the first time you're learning it well, and you don't have to go back and maybe unlearn some things that didn't allow you to ask questions in real time, right? So a lot of benefit coming from just enabling the workforce with this tool in their toolkit. And I'll leave you with this last quote that he shared with us about how the challenge with our training sessions is making sure all participants can successfully retain the right concepts and procedures, and above all, apply them. So Kahoot is fun, playful, and helps us focus. So, a little bit of a key win recap before we jump into Q&A, but the first key win here is SNCF has improved trainees' critical knowledge retention using the capabilities of Kahoot to engage and to make things interactive. Trainers are also feeling more enabled now to deliver the complex in training in an engaging way, where they're receiving feedback in real time. They're getting a better sense of people's participation, and not just talking to an empty room anymore. Trainees are now more involved and motivated during this complex training. And then finally, SNCF as the organization has been able to track the knowledge a lot better before and after trainings, which has made the process much more efficient and much more streamlined, and ensuring that they're having very powerful follow-up strategy built around these complex training needs. So with that being said, that truly now brings us to Q&A. I've seen the chat popping off, and I see Tyler, fingers on fire over there. Any questions that maybe we'd like to talk about now? We've had a chance to, get a lay of the land of what is being experienced in regards to engagement in the global workforce. We've talked about some potential solutions Kahoot can provide for you. And then finally, we've also discussed a real world example of Kahoot being used for the use case we're here spotlighting today. So questions, comments, thoughts, emotional outbursts, really anything is welcome. But let me take a look at the Q&A section and see if there's anything here. Nothing. I was actually referring to the colors that appear on the different answers, whether they're grouped by color. Oh, that's a great question. So I believe Maria is asking about the brainstorm feature that we just did. She's asking, the colors that appear on the different answers, are they grouped by color according to the response? And the answer is yes. Brainstorm is enabled with AI capabilities, and it will preemptively scan the responses, group them by color, and then put them also all together if they have similar themes, which is really neat for you as a facilitator, because now that idea group can be voted on as a whole. So if they're, and it gives ability for everybody else to vote on, different ideas as well. So Dan says, she does not have 360, so my question is, will she have the same capabilities when I give her permission? Great question, Dan. If you yourself have Kahoot 360, There are some premium features there that if you share to somebody who doesn't have a paid subscription with those premium features, they'll be able to see everything that is available on the base kind of free plan. But yes, they won't be able to access the question types maybe that are specifically allocated to your paid subscription. Good question. Um, Somebody asks here about, are there ever any issues with confidentiality if, let's say, a pharmaceutical company uses Kahoot for SOP training? That's a great question. I'm assuming you mean like the content maybe being external facing in some way is how I'm interpreting this. And the answer to this is there is little to no risk on this, really no risk, because when you have a Kahoot corporate account, that is a closed system, right? So none of that is external facing. It's all housed under the one account and is only visible to the people that you deploy it to. So, yes, that will not be a factor or a risk under our Kahoot corporate plan. So if you do have questions on that, please feel free to drop a follow-up answer and we can reach out to you and maybe discuss acquiring you a corporate account if you are interested in that. But okay, lastly, Ryan, you guys laid out the framework for before training, during training, after training. Are there any examples actually built in Kahoot that we could see how it was put together and working as described? So there are definitely a lot of templates that you can use. So like the before the training, I will say, oh, actually asterisk on that. I will say in regards to like templates for stories, which would be the before training bit, we actually don't have any templates in stories quite yet, but we do have many templates for the during training part and the after training part. When you go to create a Kahoot, you can just access the template library and you'll see an array of existing templates there. Absolutely. Aline asks, personal accounts as well. That portion I'm not too clear on. I want to say that the same logic still stands, but we can actually follow up on that with you, Aline. That's a good question. So Tyler, maybe let's just make a note of that. Or unless you know the answer right off the top of your head, but I will circle back to that for sure. Okay. That being said, last question, just hear a quick poll from us, and I promise I will release you and stop holding you virtually hostage here. And this is for, so if you're interested in learning more about the capabilities of, what we talked about, stories, the other modalities, maybe some of the features you saw today, you might not have access to, this will help us know if we should send some folks your way. Okay, moving right along. It's been a pleasure. Once again, my name is Galilea. Thank you so much for everybody's participation. I hope that you were able to glean some great insights from today, take some tangible tips and takeaways with you. And here to remind you, don't forget to sign up for our next installment of the Work Summit, which is coming in Q4. We have our ongoing Kahoot 101 hosted by our lovely Tyler here monthly for both advanced and basic training. That's where you find out about how to actually work the platform, and it's a very technical kind of webinar. This was more, as I mentioned at the top of things, about thought leadership, about strategy, high level information, and some further contextualization around this use case. But we look forward to seeing you at the next one. It's been a pleasure, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Oh, actually, last thing I'll do is this, and then bye-bye. Wilson, if you're still in here, great job. Lisa J in second place. And Michaela, first place. Great job, guys. Murphy Law in fourth and Tasha in fifth. Alrighty. Now truly, much like my my culture here, saying goodbye yet again. But this time for real, I promise. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, and it's been a pleasure.